Welcome to Boardswell's Coffee Chat. I am Sabrina Hannam, the CEO of Boardswell. Boardswell is the match app. We think of Boardswell as the Tinder for executive and boards. Boardswell partners with ERG groups in order to help them with their mission of the commerce, community, culture, and career. And we do this by offering Boardswell as a company perk. We have offerings such as coaching, career portfolios, peer groups, learning circles, events, networking, and match apps. We offer a comprehensive platform to help to create equity and inclusion in organizations and to create a more inclusive team. One of the ways that we do this is by using a combination of data and analytics to identify and match qualified professionals from a wide range of industries and use our proprietary technology to match them fast. We're committed to bringing the best minds to the boardroom and executive suite to help drive corporate success. One of the ways that we do this is through demystifying wellness in the leadership journey. And so today we're bringing Ohilda Holguin to come in to speak to us about this and to have a conversation about this. Ohilda is a speaker, education consultant and trainer, Amazon best-selling author, wellness coach, sales professional. She is the founder of Latinas in Wellness and currently a sales channel manager for the East Coast at Logitech. Serves as the global leader for Logi Amigos, Logitech's Latin ERG group, and speaks on behalf of Logitech's Women Who Master program, which highlights women of color in tech. Ohilda is also a 2022-2023 Amex Luminary Fellow and Education Reform Now 2021 Leaders of Color Fellow. In 2019, she was awarded a proclamation by the current New York City Mayor, Eric Adams, for her dedication to schools while he was the Borough Brooklyn president. She serves on the board of the Coalition for Schools, Educating Mindfully, and Monroe Business School. Ohilda is the proud mother of a 9-year-old daughter, a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and identifies as Afro-Latina. Welcome, Ohilda.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. It's funny because when you asked for my bio and I was writing, I was like, do I do all those things? But I thank you and thank Boardswell and everyone who's attending this amazing conversation and chat today for the opportunity to just continue and supporting boards, continuing and supporting organizations, companies, people of color, women, and the men who are in this together with us as allies. We appreciate every single one of you, and I'm looking forward to just having this conversation around wellness because it's such an important topic right now, especially more after COVID, even though it's always been something that is needed in our communities, but now more than ever.
Absolutely. Thank you. One of the books that you've written is Driven Success, and it talks about there's so many different ways that we can talk about entrepreneurships, leaping to take that step, steps they should avoid, how to navigate certain business worlds. Wellness in the leadership journey focuses in this conversation on what are the skill competence for chief future officers. So my understanding of it would probably be emotional quotient, so this EQ, but I'm not a wellness coach, so we're bringing you in to tell us, like, let's go through a few of these components. Let's talk about the C-level executives and the different components. So first, for financial wellness and the CFO. The CFO today, we've seen they're managing disruptions. There's so much uncertainty for tomorrow, and there's certain hyper responsiveness to the changes in this business environment and the economy overall. We don't know where this economy is going. And so how do financial leaders adapt through this economic volatility, this technology innovation, where they need to put NetSuite into their different organizations, or are we going to use other tools to help us in this accounting process, and coping with inflation concerns and emerging technology investment opportunities? How does the CFO, the next generation CFO, think about financial wellness?
So, the thing about wellness is, and especially financial wellness, is that there's fear around it, right? There's anxiety around it. You hear in the news, well, there's a recession coming, there's inflation. What does that mean? During COVID, there was this rush to hire people and to support in different ways. So companies, as well as employers and CFOs, really had to be a little more nimble in what was happening. Then there was purchasing across the board and sales that was kind of different, right? People were purchasing out of fear. Organizations were purchasing out of drastic, quick changes that usually they planned for. So I would say that one of the key, and this is for probably every position in leadership, one of the key things is having that flexibility, understanding that the world we lived in before, where we kind of could forecast better, that your sales team knew where the opportunities were coming from, that your numbers made more sense, is not the world we are in at this time. Now, will it reset? I believe so, because I think that it's happening right now. I think that a lot of companies made a lot of money. As you can see, there's a lot of tech companies letting people go. But the job market actually hasn't been reduced. It's actually still viable, which means that it's kind of a shift in positions, not necessarily lack of, financial wellness in our companies. There are still sales. There are still, income and investments that are growing. It's just a matter of, it's not going to look like it did in the last 3 years. So being flexible and understanding that now you have to make some little tweaks here and there, I think would help tremendously for that role for the CFOs.
Sure, Ohilda, that's such a great point, because as you mentioned that the roles are not necessarily gone because we have this economic issues, or they no longer exist. As we see certain companies, major tech companies, are having massive layoffs, but then they're investing in AI. So that means that there are actually opportunities and there's capital there. It's just the human capital, if we want to talk about that, that's shifting, and the investment opportunities going through AI. So now we're thinking about, do we even want to be focusing on whether we'll be interviewed by AI or a robot? But thinking about that financial wellness and understanding that it's not necessarily that the capital isn't there, it's just shifting to other resources. Thank you for that. So the second aspect is the CHRO, usually, and this workplace wellness and culture, right? So what we see is, people and talent is a risk, right? We hear this saying that culture eats strategy for lunch. And so what we're seeing now is that investors want to know, how do you assess culture from the outside in before it hits headlines? And the CHRO's role now has been to working to create this conversation with the boards and getting better at this, so it's a bigger conversation for a larger board. So how does the CHRO in this environment create this workplace wellness?
I actually, and I don't think you knew this, but I've spoken at conferences to several HR departments and organizations. And, I think that for the first time, they're also experiencing the need for wellness themselves first. So I would start there. I would start with, the HRO needs to know if their team is actually well. And what I mean by that is, a lot of companies, and we still have these programs where we outsource our EAP programs, or things like Virgin Pulse, emotional health. There's all these organizations that we probably pay to give trainings and workshops, but wellness sometimes doesn't have to be that complicated. And what I mean by that is, listening to what the needs are within your company, right? Within your organization. It starts with, everyone obviously has different company culture. So establishing the company culture means that you need to know who's in your company. What are their needs? Do they need to not have hour-long meetings and maybe they're 45 minutes long? Do you need to establish a strict policy of forwarding emails, when you're on vacation, on weekends? Do you need to remind people and really teach them how to use that send later option in Google for the emails? So it really expressing and showing that wellness is key for you. You mentioned that I work for Logitech. Sometimes in our meetings, our CEO is running on the treadmill. That wasn't unheard of before. So I think listening is the first thing, and not being scared of what that means. Maybe they do have mental health issues because a lot has happened, right? And then once you can do that, then you can really create that strategy. It's no longer, hey, we give you reimbursement for you to go work out. It's really about what are the individual needs of your company so that your employees can be successful and they're not, bringing their depression, their lack of sleep, anxieties to work because they can't be productive if that's what's happening. It'll just lead to burnout.
Sure. And you mentioned a couple of things, and we'll talk about them in this order. First is just, so what skill competence does this CHRO need to bring? And this emotional wellness now. So what is the skill competence of like the chief diversity officer? And when because you mentioned how are we doing? And so what we see with chief diversity officers, there's no budget, they're burned out, there's no support. And a lot of them stay on with a company with an 18-month tenure, and then they're done. And so there's this intersection of culture, tough times, and Glassdoor and the new generation, which is blind. People are taking screenshots of their comp and all these things and what's happening in the different companies. So the chief diversity officer and that just burnout and this high turnover, what skill competence does this chief diversity officer need around emotional wellness?
And I didn't touch on that with the human resources, but they also, I think the biggest thing is also not fearing, right? Because I think that for a long time, we've always kind of said, hey, you need to probably go see a therapist, a counselor, go to your EAP person. Emotions are not things you bring to work. And that is no longer the case. And as leaders, and I was recently talking to one of the ERG leaders from another one of my divisions, and she said, in my 20, 30 years of managing, I'd never had someone who said, I'm having a mental health issue, right? So it starts by also equipping your leaders with what is emotional EQ, what is psychological safety? How do I manage it if I've never done it before?
Right.
What is okay to say or not say? How do you offend or not offend? So there's a need for us to understand that emotional EQ and psychological safety also is about listening, like giving that opportunity for that person to say, these are the things or the struggles that I have. And in addition to that, and you mentioned budgets. Yes, we may not have the money to create all of these programs that we want, but there is opportunity for things like what you're doing right now. Okay, what do we have in our network? Who do we have? Is there a local organization that has, a yoga teacher, a mindfulness teacher, who can volunteer their time? There's probably a lot of people inside of your organization that do this as a hobby on the side that would love to bring themselves and wellness into your organization, that you can ask, hey, I don't want this to be another job, but would you be willing to come, once and create like a little in-house database, right, of tools that you can use and strategies that may not cost anything. Like, look at my background. We talked about it when I first logged on. This doesn't really cost anything. It's part of Zoom, right? But just having a background, just having, the ability to feel that you don't have those pressures, you know, I don't feel like if my daughter walks by while I'm at Logitech, that somebody's gonna think I'm being disrespectful because you've created that culture where it's okay. We understand that the challenges are different. We understand that you're working from home. We understand that you may not have the same support system. You might have moved away from your current office, you know, where you were before. Maybe you had family members that would care for your children and now they've passed. So having that flexibility as well as listening to their needs and also just ask the person, what can we do? We don't have the money to, create this brand new system, but what little changes can we make for you that would support you?
Sure. And it's moving this ERG from simply a Slack channel or Slack message every once in a while, or to creating an atmosphere, like you said, with psychological safety, where you have perhaps in one of your Zoom meetings, someone in your organization that can provide some type of online yoga or any type of calming tool to help to create a mental and mindfulness tool to help you to get through the day without it costing the organization so much, but it also boosts morale. It helps the bottom line. It helps the business resource group to meet their goals as well, because now you're getting to better results. You're creating this wonderful, we talk about the culture, right? Where you're raising awareness to all of these issues. And then you're creating, when people feel supported and psychologically safe, then you're making you're making a business impact, right, through the commerce, because now you're getting your talent engaged, you're getting different insights, and you're making more of an impact as opposed to just doing business as usual. So it's being a little bit more creative and elevating your ERG.
Oh, Sabrina, you have no idea because I didn't share this with you. That's how I became the global lead for Lagi Amigos. When I joined, we had other ERGs, but it was Lagi Women, Lagi Pride, and I assumed that there was a Latin one. I just assumed. And when I reached out to the D&I team, they said, well, it's Lagi Color, it's an email, and everyone's in there. And I said, can we have a conversation? Because I don't have the same needs as our Asian colleagues, as our African American colleagues, perhaps. I mean, I actually am a part of that team as well. But, now we have a neurodiversity team. We have the Asian team, we have veterans, because we have different conversations. And again, I know not everybody has a budget, but even just allowing these folks to meet once a month to have open dialogue and conversations with each other about those needs, and then allowing them or their leaders within the ERG to bring that conversation back to the HR department, to bring it back to the leadership, to say, hey, these are some things that, we thought we were doing well, but you haven't. I mean, my ERG group told me, and we have a really big Mexican membership because they have an office in Mexico. And they said, that the marketing team, we have a whole bunch of marketing tools, and they write it in English and they translate it to Spanish. It doesn't speak to our partners or resellers or end users. So that it's like a waste of time. And we were like, oh, wow, well, they want to do their job well. So that impacts them. The fact that their partners and resellers feel like they're not heard because, yeah, they can read the content, but the content doesn't speak to them. And as an employee, you want to do a good job. Right. So these are little things that are small that you had no idea affected your company that you're already doing. You just have to do a little better, right? Like speak to the audience. Similar to, we all know that there's been so much violence and issues with police and people of color. And yesterday I had the ability with our Lagi Black Excellence team to just have a listening circle. And we spoke about what it felt like to us, the trauma that we've been through, the fears and anxieties. And just to be able to put that on your calendar and have the space to be supported with each other, it makes a difference. And it didn't cost allowed to check anything except, you know, that 1 hour where they gave us that freedom.
Sure. And with respect to, you know, one of the ERG missions is just community and that external focus. How are we going to think about how we are engaging with the community? And as you mentioned, so yes, there are things happening with the police. And so there are crimes that are happening, you know, that are not interracial crimes there. And it's now an issue of it's the person who has the power and it's wielding this power inappropriately, as opposed to this is a hate crime. So I think that is what we want to focus on in terms of we are focusing more on how can we bring this community together and be allies and be supportive, as opposed to how can we turn against each other and color code America, right? I think that's what it is. And so one of the other aspects of what you mentioned was your CEO was on a treadmill and talking to you and having meetings on a treadmill. And this brings us to physical wellness. Mm-hmm. And what I'm seeing on boards now is that we are seeing the demands of directors are getting so much more complicated. They have to be an athlete, right? They have super athlete around everything. They have to know about geopolitical challenges. They have to know about third-party risks. They have to understand the tensions with China and Russia. But they have to know so much about even succession planning. We saw that, you know, the Disney CEO came and went. There was like
that was shocked everybody, I think.
Right, that was like, you know, that's a ricochet event, and so there's so much around physical wellness. What type of competencies does the board have to bring in terms of just your physical wellness?
You know, one of the things that I think physical wellness sometimes people don't realize is that there are simple fixes, right? Like, and sometimes it could just be reminders. You are correct that the role of director is no longer about productivity, right? Before it was what are the results? You know, where are we headed? Let's plan and strategize in that growth model that, you know, we've all kind of studied and really felt comfortable in at this point in our lives. But now the role is, okay, how can we still be productive with all of these challenges that you said, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's, you know, physical. But for physical, there's a lot of different aspects to physical. So it could be reminding folks, taking those physical breaks, right? Stand up, walk around. You can take a meeting outside. What about some earbuds? You know, giving people the flexibility to be in movement, because myself included, right? I used to be an outside sales rep. So I was always in movement. I was lifting boxes. I was going to conferences. I was in and out. And most of my work is virtual now. And there's a lack of exercise when you shift your model. And there's also a lack of interaction, right? In the past, even if it was just leaving your home, you were physically going to the train or the bus or your car. You were communicating with people along the way. So I think creating an opportunity for people to know that you can have standing desks, that, you know, there are ergonomic tools that can support you, that there are webcams, whether it's in your conference room, whether it's on your laptop, that have a different support system. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, I just use my laptop camera, but really that wasn't meant for what we're doing now, which is collaboration. You know, using content cameras with collaboration tools, cameras that allow for group settings, and so that you have remote folks understand that they feel they're a part of conversation. Physical wellness also has a lot to do with if you're in a room and it's all virtual and the speakers, their background is too dark, their lighting isn't well, their sound isn't perfect, which we've all encountered some of that. But if we can create a plan to say, these are some other tools, whether there's tech or not, as well as some strategies that can now allow for the physical space. And sometimes also just even having the conversation of what are your space look like? Do you have a plant in your home, in your desk? Do you have essential oils burning so that you can kind of get that mood? And one thing that I started implementing in my meetings is, because we're always in, especially virtual meetings, the first couple of minutes, I tell people, please go get your water, get settled. If you need to readjust, go stretch. It takes a minute or two, take a deep breath, turn off that camera, and realize that people have neurodiverse issues that maybe they didn't have before or have been exacerbated, and that, allowing for that, not demanding that they're always on camera. There's that, to them is also physical.
Yes, and you mentioned physical wellness in terms of just taking a walk. And I live in New York, and I encourage people to take a wellness walk in Central Park or something, to just get a breath of fresh air and step away and come back to what you're doing. The next piece that we want to talk about is just relationship wellness. So the CMO, the CHRO typically have this strategic vision towards operating, scaling the business. They're creating the values for partners, customers, employees, investors. How do we ensure that this relationship wellness stays intact?
Relationships are really complex, I would say, right? And I think that some of the things that sometimes we have lacked in because of this new virtual world is having that one-on-one. Whether it was inside your own organization that you used to, how they say, talk at the water cooler, right? Maybe you saw them at the bathroom. So I think that there's a responsibility for us to still do that, just differently. Like, it doesn't have to always be a scheduled meeting. Maybe I can chat you and say, hey, how are you? How was your day? On Fridays, I like to get to some of my teams and say, hey, what are you listening to today? Mondays, you can have a little startup meeting. Hey, how was your weekend? Like, let's get this week started, and kind of motivate and re-energize us, because as human beings, we need interaction. We need to be social. And again, it doesn't take money, it doesn't take time. It just takes that little step, of reminding people that they're valuable, and giving that space, hey, I'm gonna give you a love tap. That was great today. I saw that conference, or that conversation that you had, and that speech and that workshop, whatever thing that they did, highlighting them, and reminding them the value as employees.
Sure. And that as we see more and more women transition into the CEO role, any CEO, whether you're a man or woman, need to think about strategic planning. You need to think about fundraising and all of these things. How do we focus now on wellness in the CEO leadership?
I think that, again, even as a CEO, that notion of drive, you have to care for yourself first, right? So you have to be that role model. You have to let your team know, I'm doing it because I believe that we can be better, we can be more productive if I'm well, right? And we didn't talk about this too much, but one of the things that, and I know it's not always possible in every space, but is thinking forward about how redesigning your spaces are. I mean, if you're all virtual, we have, I guess, the tools that I mentioned before, but if you're not, if you have physical spaces, what can we do? Can we create a room where people can go in and meditate? What are their seats like? Things like, are they using the right type of chairs? Things that in the past probably didn't matter as much, but physical location of offices, and especially for CEOs and where they are, it's now more of a social interaction, collaboration spaces, and places where productivity is not where it's driven. Usually we're doing this at home now. So as a CEO, being that role model, reminding people, letting people know that it is okay to take that walk, that it is okay to change some of our spaces, and rethink our design going forward as to what wellness means, and what working together in collaboration means.
Thank you. So thank you for sharing and demystifying wellness in the leadership journey. We thank our audience for joining us today, and we hope that you incorporate these wellness strategies, and we look forward to partnering with you at Boardswell, and we look forward to your wellness in whole being in this new journey that you're embarking on, whether as an executive or a board director. Thanks again, Ohilda.
Thank you for having me, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm going to send Sabrina some follow-up tips and strategies so that you guys can use it. And you're always welcome to reach out to me. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.